respectively 6 or 8 crew-cut kids. And as we were going in across the drawbridge into the tower, I remember the beef-eater in his garb put his hand on the crew-cut head of one of our kids, said, "Watch that head, they're leaving them all over the place in there." And such was our son's welcome to the Tower of London. Yeah, that's the way they disposed of the opposition, so forth. So I think there is that further incentive in Bacon to separate religion from science, religion from philosophy. Hence objective science, presuppositionalist science. And the only connection of religion to science is in the purpose it gives to science. Okay. All right. Now that leads us then to something about his inductive method, the positive side of it. And what he does here is to offer what he calls certain tables, ways of tabulating your findings, tabulating your observations. And you'll find that Stumpf talks about this. I think it's page 224. He talks of the table of presence, the table of absence, and the table of degrees. And if you're familiar with the inductive methods of John Stuart Mill in the 19th century, you'll realize that they correlate with these. John Stuart Mill called this the table of agreement, the table of difference, and the table or the method of concomitant variations. And fundamentally the same. And what they amount to really is very simple experimental methods. If you are trying to find out what is the cause of a phenomenon X, and you find that ABC precedes factors X, Y, Z, and that something like it occurs again and again, then you soon begin to suspect, by virtue of the agreement, that there is some causal relationship between C and X. Fair enough? And if you find, on the other hand, that while ABC is the antecedent of XYZ, that where C is absent, then X is absent, then from the difference, you again begin to suspect that there is a causal connection. And if you find that in increasing the amount of C, you proportionately increase the amount of X, okay, degrees, then once again, confirmation that there is causal connection. So this is simple empirical methods. You know, how do we get at the coefficient of linear expansion of a metal? You see, but by applying heat, we're able to get the relative coefficient of linear expansion in comparison with other metals, so forth. So that's simple kind of thing. But notice how what you discover, that A is causally related to X, enables you to exercise power over A. in producing X, you see. And consequently, the power over nature. Very, very simple. Very limited in terms of modern scientific method. There's no notion of the role of a hypothesis. Role of a hypothesis in suggesting experimentation. No notion of a conceptual model, paradigms and paradigm shifts as we talk of it nowadays. Nothing of that. Experimental methods, very simple, very uncomplicated. But it's the beginning of modern empirical scientific methods. Francis Bacon. Let's see. Yeah, any questions, comments? Bacon's a fascinating figure. He was very much involved in British politics. He was Chancellor of England, I'm told, under Elizabeth, under James I. Yes, he tried and connived to get high political office under Elizabeth, only got lesser offices, but under James I he had more fortune. So an very interesting figure, very fascinating. Now you say philosophically, doesn't seem to be doing much philosophy. He's interested in science. Yeah, and I think two comments about that. One is that in those days people didn't think of them as being any different. That is to say, the sciences have achieved independent status only relatively recently, which is why people in any discipline are apt to work for Doctor of Philosophy degrees. Way through the 19th century, science was known as natural philosophy. In British universities, American universities, here at Wheaton, if you look at old catalogues, natural philosophy. So you don't get the distinction between disciplines nearly as clearly until 19th century, some cases later. On the other hand, Bacon's work is of real philosophical significance in two ways. One, in terms of the beginnings of modern philosophy of science. That is to say, philosophical thinking about the nature of science. Okay? And second, in terms of the shift of worldviews that's taking place, where he clearly marks a transition, as Occam was the end of the old, Bacon is the beginning of the new. Comes through very clearly.
What was his view of Occam?
Quite favorable. I've tried to trace, in reading I've tried to trace any explicit references to Occam. I don't think of any that I've found in his writings, but then he doesn't go around quoting a lot of people. Occam's ideas, yes. A British historian of science by the name of Crombie has tried to show that these tables, these methods of Bacon, were anticipated in very similar form by William of Ockham. And remember, I just pointed out that his appeal in matters of ethics was essentially the same appeal as Occam. Now, the thing I'm not clear about with Bacon is whether he is an Ockhamist regarding universals. That is to say, is he a terminist, nominalist, or is he a conceptualist? Certainly, he does not deal with any abstract ideas. But he doesn't seem to want to deny theologians the privilege of dealing with abstract ideas. You see. Now, if he was a nominalist, he would deny it was possible, even for theologians, to deal with abstract ideas. So I'm inclined to think that he's more the conceptualist but he's still very much influenced by Occam. When he was at Cambridge, let's see, I think I'm right in saying this, when he was at Cambridge, Occam was very much in vogue. In fact, and I may have that, may have a date on that. Let's see. Let's try. Yeah, when he went to Cambridge in 1577 as a student, Occam was very much in favor. Scholastic methods were still studied, but were in disfavor. 25 years before at Oxford, the writings of Duns Scotus had been burned in public in repudiation of scholastic methods and scholastic disputes. That's what they did when there was a theoretical shift taking place. They just burned it all, you know. Why clutter your library? Now they just sell the books to students. So yeah, the answer is yes. Occam's influence very much there. Yeah.
When you were discussing the difference between Bacon's inductive method and Aristotle's concept of induction,
Yes.
you said that there was a new object of knowledge for Bacon. I didn't really understand.
Yeah. Okay, you remember I was playing here with induction as the method and the object of knowledge as forms. Now, Aristotle has one kind of induction in trying to gain knowledge of forms in his sense of the term. Bacon has another sense of induction. Nice that it comes out as A and B, isn't it? In trying to gain knowledge of forms in his sense of the term. So the way of knowing, the method, is correlated, is appropriate to the object of knowledge, which is what we'd expect. That's the way it was in Plato. If forms are in some transcendent realm, then you have in your knowledge to get a handle on the transcendent. And it won't help you to study empirical cases. So you engage in dialectic, to detach from the particular and wrestle with the abstract. If forms are immanent within particulars, then you try and get them out. And so Aristotle's method of abstractive induction. If there are no real forms and you're just studying particulars, well, simple empirical methods will do it. Bacon. Okay.
Was Francis Bacon a stepping stone for pragmatism to come in?
It's tempting to say that. And I confess when I first read Bacon, that's what I used to say. But the more I've read Bacon, the less I think so. Perhaps because I'm too aware of pragmatism at the other end of the spectrum. If you're talking of Dewey's pragmatism, for instance, you'll find when we get talking about Dewey's second semester, you'll be reading Dewey's book,